So we have a winner or two. Today we're going to do the Hinge video, which is one of the tying items in our little contest with no prizes. So I'm going to teach you how to do a basic butt hinge. There's tons of different kinds of hinges and different kinds of applications. So today we're just going to start simple and small. By the way, thank you all for voting. It was great. I got so many video ideas. I'm going to be really old by the time we finish them all, but Lisa will be young, our producer over here. So anyway, we're going to get started, and I'm going to talk about the tools we need and some design considerations to take and make. Okay. So for the first part, we're going to start in small increments so nobody panics. I'll show you the tools, okay? This is for the first part. So what we need to do is have these little things. These are called chenille files, and they're not that easy to find. The cutting edge is only on the sides, and it's round. They come in all different sizes. They're also called, what else are they called? Thank God I have notes. Joint files. So this is used to cut the groove where the tubing of the hinge will sit. Okay, then we need file. Uh-oh, studio assistants left the room. A pen, marker, Sharpie preferably. And if you have a this stupid miter cutting jig vise thing that I never can remember the name of, that would be great. Some little compass caliper guys, a ruler, jeweler's saw, and blades. I'm going to be using 2/0 on this because I'm using rather thin tubing and wire. And then you want a tubing or either two tubings or a tubing and a wire that telescope, which means that they fit tightly within one another, like so. And that's very important. So sometimes you have to make your own tubing, and I'm going to do a video on how to do that using a swage box someday soon. But first we have to get through all the other 42,000 videos. So those are the basic tools. Oh, and one more thing. Need a tubing cutter, preferably a really good one, because accuracy and precise measurement in hinge making is imperative. Got it? Okay, so next I'm going to talk design. I do not have a teleprompter, so I made this. What I want to talk about in design, and these things that you need to consider, are how will your hinge function? So you need to think about these little things, and I will talk a little bit about them. I'm going to slide it down there, Lisa. Okay. So what is your hinge meant to do? Is it going to hold something heavy? Is it going to get a lot of wear and tear on it? How much weight is it going to bear? Or are you going to be like hanging small children off of one side and trying to open the other? I mean, you know what I mean. It's just like if you've got a really heavy piece or you're making a box, you don't want to use this tiny tubing that I used. You want to think a little bigger or stronger, like a gold, 14K white gold, or a nickel-plated gold. What is the direction of the swing? You don't want to make a hinge that you want to go like this, that only goes the other way, down. So that's not it. So you want to make sure that's part of your design process, to think, how is this thing going to function? How far do I need it to open? Do I want it like this? Do I want it to flap back on itself? Or do I want it to just have a slight open? So that's another thing to consider. And I think I just covered everything. I am so efficient. Now, the other thing on my other teleprompter is this. And these are things to consider in the basic hinge that we're doing today, and in all other hinges. By the way, the hinge that we're doing today is called a butt hinge, B-U-T-T. So basically, this is what it says. The only one here that might be a little confusing is sometimes you want to do a hinge system where, imagine the tube is running here and these are the two pieces of metal. You want to be able to swing the hinge like that so you can off-center set it. There are a ton of different hinges. There are bearings that can protect hinges. There's a whole bunch of other stuff to do, but right now we're just going to work on a simple butt hinge. And I am going to get ready and show you how to do that. So in this fantasy of mine, we are making a link bracelet, and you're doing it and connecting it with a butt hinge. So you'll need your bracelet elements, the 2, 3, 4, 5 pieces that you're going to be hinging. Normally they would probably be the same size, but this is a demo. And then what you want to do is go ahead and bevel these edges, just one, depending on where you want to put the hinge. If you want to put it here, then bevel that edge. But in this case, I'm going to be beveling along this edge. You can do this freestyle. You know, you can put, actually it would probably be better in a vise, because this is going to be impossible, but you can just go ahead and drag the file along at an angle. Or you can use the miter cutting jig whoopee thing that I never can remember the name of, and do your 45-degree angle this way. So that's 2 options on how to bevel it. Once you have both long sides, in this case, beveled, both sides beveled, then what you want to do is glue the little darlings together with some super glue. Okay, fine. Be that way. And you want to line these 2 beveled edges up. So I'm going to dump them down like this and make sure your other edges are squared up also, because it's already stuck and it's not lined up. Great! Let me pull it apart. Start again here. You have to work quickly. So basically you want to line up your 2 edges where the bevel is so that they're even, which these aren't. These are. So this is what you actually want it to look like, so that you've got a V-shaped channel running down the middle. And after the super glue is dried, which I would clamp it if it was together. I'm going to pry that apart, try again. Take your clamps off, and then at this point we've got our V channel. We need to make it a round U-shaped channel to fit our tubing in. So this is where our chenier or joint file comes in, and these little rounded edges on here are going to create the groove, the U-shaped groove where the tubing is going to fit. So you want to go ahead and drag the chenier file down. Now remember, when you file, that you want to think about filing in the center and not on the end, because you're going to file the ends anyway. This is a way to keep you from filing this too down on these ends. You just think middle, and it helps you to keep the cut straight. You really need to have this accurate for tubing. You can't, hinges do not work if they are not straight. They just don't work because they jam up. So you want to be really accurate and take your time and do a really nice rounded U-shaped channel inside this. If you do not have chenier files, you can try it if your tubing is big enough, or your metal is big enough, to get this is a chainsaw file. And this, trying to get the small, or whatever size fits, but I keep trying to find smaller and smaller ones. This is from a company called Oregon. They come in pairs. And the idea is to have a completely parallel sides. You don't want it a regular file where it graduates from smaller to larger. So this can be used too. This is too big for what I'm doing, so I'm not going to use it. So I'm going to stick with the chenier file. So once you've got this groove done, then we're ready to go on to the next step. So we'll do that. So what we need to do now is determine how much tubing we need. Measuring this length, we don't really even want it to be exact. So I'm going to have a little overhang on both sides. I'm going to have to put this down. I can't draw up in the air. So I'm just going to make it a little bigger. Not a big deal, so just mark it there. Another thing we need to do well, we can do that after. First thing I'm going to do is cut this. Okay, so I'm going to line this up inside here. Lock it down. And by the way, I don't know about you, but I tend to break a lot of blades cutting tubing because I'm very impatient, especially big tubing. These little ones are a little easier. Alright, and it's gone. I'll be right back! So, I found the tubing, obviously. Otherwise I would never have come back. What we're going to do now is I'm going to take, this is a little steel ruler with a cork on the back, and what it does is it raises it off the ground. What I'm going to do is just run a line down the tubing and the ruler accidentally. So we have a little black line down here, and you'll see why we have to do that in a second. Next thing we need to do is get our little bracelet link here, and we need to figure out how big we want to make the knuckles. Knuckles are the little round elements on a hinge. Now most, and I'd say 99.99% of hinges have odd numbered joints. So in either 1, 3, 5, whatever. We're going to make a 3 hinge joint here. Generally for strength purposes, you want to have the middle joint bigger than the 2 outer edges. So what I'm going to do now is determine how big I want to make that middle joint, and it can be a design decision. It can also be, you know, arbitrary. It's up to you how big. You really don't want to have it like, you know, huge and 2 little tiny things on the end. You want to try to distribute the stress evenly, and the middle is going to get a lot of stress, so that's why we're going to make that one a little bigger. So I've already predetermined my size, but I'm going to show you how I did it. So you take your little ruler. I wonder if this would be easier to see on white paper, which I have none of. Let me grab some. All right. So what we're going to do is measure our little bracelet link here, and this one is 26, right? 26 millimeters long. So, and I'm not going to write upside down again because it's just too scary. I'm going to divide that by 2, which gives me 13. Now that leaves, that's 13 plus the middle piece. So what I have to do is divide this by 2 and come up with, see why I can't do that, 6.5. So that means 6.5 here, 6.5 here, and 13 in the middle. Did that make sense? So what I'm going to do is go ahead and mark off my 13 millimeters in the center here by taking, like I said, the 6.5, which I've already done this. So take 6.5 and on this side and 6.5 on this side, and this middle part here, with luck, will be 13, which it is. So this is where, this is how long your middle hinge is going to be. At this point, what I'm going to do is just take my hinge here, and I'm going to line it up. And notice I don't care really where it goes. You can either use the these guys and drag and score, or you can just do it like this with your hands to mark where it's going to go. So I would also check this to make sure it's exact same size that we want it to be by using your ruler again. Because sometimes it's the difference between, you know, cutting inside the black line or outside the black line. Where is the actual measurement? So when you measure this, you can say, okay, oh, I got to cut outside the black line, that equals 13, or inside the black line equals 13. I hope that makes sense. So I'm checking this, and it looks like I need to cut exactly in the middle of the line. So now I know where to place it inside my tube cutting jig vise thing to get my 2 little pieces. So I'm going to cut that because you've already seen the fabulous cutting experience once. I don't want to make you watch it 2 more times, so I'll be right back. Okay, we're back. Okay, I've cut it. It's my 3 little hinge knuckles are on here. We're not going to talk about that yet. What I want to do is I'm going to use this bigger tubing to show you what I'm going to be babbling about next. I'm going to draw you our little clasp hinge here, very roughly. So we've got our knuckles, right? 2 smaller, 1 larger. When you solder a hinge together, 2 elements will be soldered to one side of the metal, and 1 element will be soldered on the other side of the metal. Here's your tubing or wire running through the middle. What can happen is that when you go to solder, if you put solder in this spot and solder in this spot and solder in this spot, the solder can run all the way down here and stick this piece to this side, or vice versa, these pieces to this side. We do not want that. So the reason we drew a line down the side of it was to know where to do this little trick. We're going to bevel these little corners in here on both sides, and what that's going to create is a space. Solder will not flow through air. You know, it likes to hook onto the tight metal and run down it. So if there's nothing for it to run down, it's going to stop. So that's one way that we're going to protect this hinge from being soldered in the wrong places. So here we do have a close-up now on that, but you're just going to, that's what the line is. So do your beveling at the ends of each line, and it doesn't have to be extremely precise or a lot, just a little bit on either end of your straight line to give it just enough gap for the solder to not flow. Did that make sense? Please understand it. Because I'm confused too. Okay, so now this is already pre-beveled and pre-cut. What we're going to do now is get ready to solder this together. This is not as hard as you thought. So now we're going to get this thing prepped for soldering. I use whiteout as a anti-solder resist kind of thing. You can use yellow ochre mixed with water, or what's that stuff called that they make pencils out again? Graphite and water. Anything that's going on at the neighbors. Anything that keeps the solder from flowing. And this one I have to wear my optimizers because these are really tiny little hinges. And what I'm doing is painting the backside where I don't want the solder to flow, and the part of the end that I don't want the solder to flow. And even though we've done our groove, it's always good to double check to make sure, I mean not double check, but to double protect, because if it's both, you know, you don't want to do this over, let's face it. So I'll have a close-up of this because it's very difficult to see from the video camera. And once we get this all painted up, we'll get back together when I put it together. So one of the little tricks that I learned was to, when you solder, when you put all your little knuckles together, to solder them, to hold them straight in line, is to use pencil graphite. So if you can't find graphite that fits your tubing really nicely, like this one does, or you're using a smaller hinge, you can bundle them, put several of them. This one actually could use one more in here to make it tighter. And then you can use this while you're soldering, so it'll hold everything in line for you. So it's a nice little tool, and it's cheaper. Okay. So I just got done being very frustrated. I hate putting hinges together to solder, but little trick, if you're using a bundle of lead, pack as many in there as you can, because you kind of want it to be tight on the lead so it holds its position. The problem I was having was I didn't have enough leads in, they kept spinning around. So when you set this up for soldering, you're going to have your plain edge here. Here's your bevel. Oh, that's a terrible bevel. And then your middle one is going to have your bevel over here. That. And then the other one's going to have the bevel. Jeez, I'm like brain dead today. The other bevel's over here. So it's kind of set up like that. And this one has the white out over here. This has white out over here. This has white out over here. And then your metal with your curves, with your groove is underneath these pieces here. So then when we go in and solder, we're going to put solder, little tiny pieces. You want to use the minimum amount of solder when you're doing hinges, because the more you have, the more chances it is that it'll run all over the place. So once you get this silly thing lined up, which is probably the hardest thing about doing the hinge, is getting it lined up, then we're going to go in and say hi to Solder Girl. Oh God, I gotta go back to the home. The deal here is, this hinge I don't want soldered over here. I don't want this one soldered over here. So I'm not gonna put any flux over here. I'm only gonna put the flux right along that edge, right along that edge. And then on the back hinge, I'm only gonna put flux along that edge. I balled up my solder over here It just seems to stick a little better. I'm going to stick that up there on that side. Oop, that's a lot of muck on it. I'm going to take this one over here. This is like, you don't even want to breathe on this thing at this point. And then another little, smaller here. See how teeny those new pieces are? Every time I touch it, it moves. Oh! Okay. Solder Girl has gone insane. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and solder this now. We are fluxed and we are soldered. The leads will not catch on fire. Make sure when you buy your leads that you don't get some that have polymers added to them. Solder Girl having fun. Oh. I'm just sitting here waiting for the metal to heat. Metal to heat. Metal to heat. Heat up my metal on the outside. Get it hot. Come in here, hit the tubing. Starting to flow. There we go. We got that one going. Pull the solder down here, I hope. Come on, George. Yay. Praise the Lord. Pass the ketchup. Done. So I've pulled my hinges out of Solder Girl's hands and went ahead and cleaned up any little extra solder globber doodles that are on the metal. Also, you want to take where your hinges were overhanging on the edges. You want to go ahead and either saw and file sand, blah 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 combo, or just go ahead and file them square with the rest of your piece. But remember, this piece is not square, it's just junk stuff. And then run your wire through, put them together, and it should look something like that. Something like that anyway. And you want it to be able to move. Oh my God, it moves. I'm always shocked when I can pull this off. I really don't like hinges, but if I made 400 of them every day, I'd probably get better at them. I make them maybe once a year, twice a year, so it's a little stressful. Anyway, so what I'm going to do with this at this point is I'm going to clip these wires down to about, I'm going to leave about 1 millimeter hanging off each edge. Maybe a little more. Maybe 1.25 millimeters. And then I'm going to just rivet this little annoying thing down and we'll be done. So that's too much. I should have my optimizers on, but I'm trying to be beautiful for you. I look like some kind of Poindexter or something with them on. Okay, I gotta find my block and I'll back here for the rivet. So you've seen like my 300 riveting videos, so I'm not gonna go into this too far or too much, but you're just basically spreading the metal over the tube. If you are, I'll stop hammering so you can hear me. If you are using a tube in the center instead of wire like this, just follow the similar procedure that you would do for, did we do that? We did that. Tube setting, tube riveting. So using the plumb bob and all that stuff with the riveting tools. So basically this is done. I'm going to probably not going to bother finishing riveting it in because I'm going to throw it in the garbage. But it was fun sharing and I had such a good time. Congratulations, Hinge people. I hope you don't hate me. I hope you loved that video. One more little point. If you don't have tubing that fits, you can make tubing with jump ring coils and then make the size mandrel that you want for your tubing and then make your coils and then drop solder around the coils to hold it together. And you've got a tube, so you can, and it also could be a really interesting design element to have that kind of spiral looking hinge on it. So there's the back side, there's the front side. So hope you had fun. Thanks for coming. Ciao. This is Nancy LT Hamilton signing off.